The story of Amnesia: The Dark Descent begins with a man named Daniel. On a journey to Algeria with his mentor Herbert to locate artifacts for the British Museum, he becomes trapped in an antechamber where he was met with an unexpected relic that would soon change his life and end many of those around him. Amnesia focuses on this relic, later to be referenced as the Orb, as the centerpiece of its storyline. The Orb possesses an alien power that is needed by a man named Alexander of Brennenburg to return to his otherworldly home. His motive for visiting is uncertain, but it is known that he had no sympathy for those around him. Alexander lived through multiple human generations on Earth, using vitae, an ingredient found in adrenaline from agonized humans, to keep himself alive. To obtain such agonized humans, he had to use others to kidnap innocent people and slowly torture them to the point of death. Locals became suspicious and started becoming more aware of the disappearances and theorized the Baron of the nearby Castle Brennenburg is the same one that was there hundreds of years prior. As Alexander ages, he is pressured into ever-increasing stress and anguish, which lets him know his time is running short, and he needs to find a worthy candidate to help him achieve his goal of leaving Earth. In Algeria, Daniel is rescued from the tomb after an hour of entrapment and is brought back to his senses. The account confused him as he recalls suffocating after mere minutes. His items were saved and laid by his side, and there lie the broken pieces of the orb he had just discovered. After his return to London, Daniel greets many of his colleagues and brings up the question of the orb. He begins having waking nightmares and is no longer able to think straight. He confronts his physician about his sleep and his friend, a geologist at the museum, about the orb. It becomes all too strange as both of them are found dead soon after. Daniel begins to think something is after him and the orb, and at an opportune time, a letter from the Baron of Brennenburg arrives, inviting him to stay there as the Baron states he can help. Without much of a choice, Daniel accepts and makes his way there. While initially stunned by its interior, Daniel became wary of Brennenburg's many quiet and strange corridors, structural weakness, and overwhelming darkness. Alexander slowly leads Daniel into what his real purpose for being there is, and after one too many rituals where Daniel is forced to kill innocent people, he realizes what he has become. To remove his pain and guilt, Daniel drinks the amnesia potion and forgets everything, but leaves a note for himself to remember.
Go to the inner sanctum, find Alexander, and kill him.
Many characters in the game are given names that are references to happenings of the time in which amnesia takes place. The first example that comes to mind is Wilhelm von Gerich. Wilhelm is an officer who is a member of the Order of the Black Eagle, which we will talk about later. Alexander, in need of vitae, and also a member of the Order, invites and contracts Wilhelm to be the leading officer of Castle Brennenburg. What he didn't know, however, was he would meet the same cruel fate the prisoners he captured did when his presence was putting Alexander's plot in jeopardy. According to the Amnesia wiki, which I will be referencing a lot, Wilhelm's name could be based on a character from the poem The Battle of Blenheim. While it's understood this is a possible inspiration for the character name, it does not provide any historical context as the character in the poem is a female. I was not able to find any other information that could point to Wilhelm being a real historical figure, although Wilhelm, or William, was a German emperor much later in history than Amnesia's timeline. But before dismissing this, I want to point attention to the affiliation Wilhelm and Wilhelm II have in terms of orders. This is where the Order of the Black Eagle plays a part. The order was, in its first stage, an order representing the highest form of chivalry and knighthood in the Kingdom of Prussia. Its first introduction was in 1701 and continued into the early 1900s, but in a different form. After an amount of time, the order was divided into two classes: members of reigning houses and capitular knights. One of these houses includes the House of Hohenzollern, of which both Wilhelm I and Wilhelm II were a part of. The order is made a big deal in Amnesia, as it is mentioned many times in Alexander's notes, one of which makes note of Alexander being known as the same one the members' fathers knew. The order's symbol, as shown, is seen multiple times in the game. While Daniel's character is simply known as being the player, he has no context in history. Alexander, however, does. His character is based on Frederick I of Prussia, who became Elector of Brandenburg and Duke of Prussia in 1688. He died about 12 years after the order was introduced, which makes the character Alexander make sense in the way that he is used. Brennenburg, or Brandenburg in history, is a major prefecture that was located in the Holy Roman Empire and still remains in Germany as a federal state. The Castle Brennenburg, however, is a fictional castle, which is made with the mindset that it's common sense there would have been castles there at the time, The style of Brennenburg's architecture, from the walls to the cellars to the prisons, is painfully accurate. One thing that Brennenburg does interestingly is its nave concept. The entire thing is built with church architecture in mind, even having a room called the choir and another called the transept. These rooms have similarities to their real-life counterparts, but do not closely resemble them in any way. The Brennenburg version is much larger and gives it a much darker and more terror-oriented vibe, which makes sense as there are 3 torture rooms in each, with special machines designed to destroy limbs and even kill. The 6 torture devices are the Brazen Bull, the Iron Maiden, the Breaking Wheel, the Strappado, Saw, and Judas Cradle. I would not like to go into detail about these, as they are quite disturbing by nature, but I do want to say they are completely accurate, and the descriptions the game gives, while gut-wrenching, give a good idea of what the machines were used for and how it felt being a victim of them. The last major character that is shown is Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, a famous alchemist, physician, and occult writer. His mission, like many other occult alchemists of the time, was to find the legendary Philosopher's Stone, an artifact that could turn base metals into gold, as well as have other purposes. The stone represented alchemic perfection. The stone was known for having the power of rejuvenation and offering immortality. It is, in the game, even referred to as the Philosopher's Stone once by Agrippa himself. Agrippa's presence gradually heightens as the game progresses, and it is made known that his being is a major part in Alexander's search for the orb. While it is stated he died in 1535, in the game his soul is taken out of him and put into a lifeless body which speaks through a contraption that can be turned on and off. Alexander's manipulation led Agrippa to take the offer to live forever, but at a cost. Until Alexander could deliver his promise of finding an orb and bringing his body back to life, he would have to remain motionless for centuries. And so he did. The orb in the game is also mentioned to have been portrayed in multiple pieces of artwork through European history, specifically kings and priests holding them. That is, in fact, true. The orbs were first a symbol in the mystery religion of Mithraism. The orb chamber in Amnesia and the tomb in which Daniel was entrapped are both called Mithraeums, which were cavern temples designed to represent the universe. The orbs were the centerpiece of these temples, just like how the orb is the centerpiece of the orb chamber. The age of the orbs cannot be accounted for, as the tomb of Tin Hanan was far older than most Mithraic temples. The orb's legendary status and otherworldly attributes made it a fascination of many philosophers and high-status people at the time. It is possible that the orbs were the inspiration for the globus cruciger, or cross-bearing globe, which was first used by Byzantine emperors and remained as a symbol of authority throughout Europe's Middle Ages. One thing that is unique about the image of Christ holding the globus cruciger is that it does not have the cross on it. The cross is taken place by Christ's presence. If this is any indication of why the Philosopher's Stone was simply seen as a globe, was because the power it held could, in a way, make you a god. Not everyone is destined to have that kind of power, so accidentally stumbling upon an orb could lead to bad things. When Agrippa found his orb, he mentions having been chased by an unearthly being, tearing down the world and catching up to the orb to retrieve it. This is called the Shadow, and it has a basis in Mithraism. Mithraists believed that it could have been Mithra, their god, himself trying to reclaim the orbs and prevent others from seeking the power they held. Agrippa made it out alive and was able to withhold it. Correction. Agrippa wasn't able to withhold the orb. The Shadow spared him but took the orb back. Alexander took it and used it for his own sake, but accidentally broke it into 6 pieces and was not able to mend it together. The pieces you are told to look for in the transept and choir are the 6 pieces of Agrippa's orb. When Daniel was trapped in the tomb, the orb kept him alive and the Shadow followed behind. It broke only because he was uninitiated in the mystic arts. Daniel sought knowledge and not power, which led the Shadow following him to take its time. He was tainted by the Shadow, meaning it, in a way, branded him and invoked its powers into him. Both Daniel and Wire, Agrippa's assistant and friend, were able to use the orbs without incurring the Shadow's wrath, as it deemed them worthy of handling it. However, when it was Alexander's will that turned the two from their good intentions, the Shadow became vengeful and sought to kill the beholders. If Daniel were to have submitted to the Shadow when he found the orb by yielding to its superior will, according to Alexander, none of the events of the Dark Descent would have occurred. The nightmares that Daniel was having could have been the Shadow's first attempt at communicating with Daniel. As he said, it was as if a voice were calling across the void. Daniel's physician, Dr. Tate, gave him medication to stop the recurring nightmares, which would explain why the Shadow would have gone and killed him. It also explains why the geologist and the professor were killed, as their curiosity could have been the end of Daniel's journey with the Shadow. Alexander, however, turned Daniel against the Shadow's will and angered it. It was not after Daniel spitefully at any point prior. Daniel was, however, rightfully in reason to believe he was next to be killed. Realizing this, after having killed dozens of innocent people and performing rituals against the Shadow, created overwhelming guilt within him. After drinking the amnesia potion, Daniel forgot every memory of his except for his name, where he lived, and exactly how to rebuild a broken orb. By the end of the game, after reading through all the notes, it is understood that he remembers everything from his past again. If Daniel chooses to kill Alexander instead of sending Agrippa through the portal to be with Wire, he is spared by the Shadow and is able to leave Brennenburg knowing he did himself justice. If he chooses to save Agrippa and send him through the portal, he is killed shortly after by the Shadow, and Brennenburg crumbles onto itself, sealing away all memory of the events that had occurred behind its walls, allowing the deaths of innocent people to go without justice. The orbs would remain hidden away, the rubble masking the Shadow they wielded.